I woke up to sunlight sliding across the curtains, warm and golden, like any other perfect morning. For a second, everything felt normal: the birds, the faint laughter of relatives in the courtyard, the smell of marigolds and mendi in the air. It was my son's wedding day. The biggest, happiest day of our lives. Then I saw the strands of hair scattered across the pillow. My breath caught. I touched my head, and my heart stopped. Smooth. Bare. My scalp felt cold against my trembling fingers. I stumbled toward the mirror, half hoping it was a nightmare. But no. My reflection stared back at me, bald. Every inch of my hair, gone. At first, I thought it was a prank gone wrong. Maybe someone had used some kind of shampoo reaction, or a medical mishap. But then, from the corner of my dressing table, I noticed a folded note. Pink paper. My daughter-in-law's favorite color. Now we're even. No name. No signature. Just that one line. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the vanity to steady myself, staring at that note as tears burned my eyes. Even? For what? What could I possibly have done to deserve this? Outside, the house was buzzing. The wedding planner shouting instructions. The cooks clattering trays in the kitchen. My relatives laughing, gossiping, taking selfies in their glittering clothes. And me, the groom's mother, hiding in my bedroom, bald. I wrapped a shawl around my head and locked the door. My phone buzzed with calls, my sister, my friends, even my son, Ariv. But I couldn't answer. Not yet. I stared into the mirror again. My mind raced back through every interaction with Ria, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law. The sweet smiles. The polite words. The way she hugged me the first day Ariv brought her home, too tight, too deliberate. I'd thought she was trying to impress me. Now I wasn't so sure. Something about her had always felt off. The knock on my door startled me. Mom? Ariv's voice. Are you ready? The photographers are waiting. I froze. My voice came out hoarse. Give me a few minutes, Beta. I'm not feeling well. He hesitated. Should I call the doctor? No. I snapped too quickly. Just, give me a moment. When his footsteps faded, I sank onto the bed, clutching that cursed note. Now we're even. I tried to remember every conversation with her. The subtle tension. The moments when her eyes would flicker with something cold whenever Ariv wasn't looking. And then it hit me. 2 weeks ago, I'd confronted her about a rumor that she'd been involved with someone before Ariv. I hadn't meant to humiliate her. I just wanted the truth. But she'd looked me in the eye and said, "Don't worry, Ma. I'll make sure you never forget me." I'd brushed it off as youthful arrogance. But now it sounded like a threat. I couldn't go to the wedding like this. Not bald. Not humiliated. Not after everything I'd done for this family. But if I didn't show up, tongues would wag. The guests would gossip. The media, yes, we'd invited journalists, would spin it into a scandal. So I did the only thing I could. I grabbed my old wig, the one I'd worn years ago for a costume party, and adjusted it as best I could. It looked fake, but maybe no one would notice under the dupatta. As I pinned the veil in place, I caught my reflection again. I looked composed. Elegant. But behind the silk and jewels, there was rage. A quiet, simmering rage that refused to die. I walked downstairs, every step echoing like a drumbeat of war. The hall was glowing with golden lights and jasmine garlands. Ariv looked radiant in his sherwani, his smile wide and proud. When he saw me, his face softened. "Mom, you look beautiful." I forced a smile. "So do you, my son." Then my eyes found her. Ria. Standing beside the mandip, draped in red and gold, her face glowing with bridal makeup and satisfaction. When our gazes met, her lips curved into the faintest smirk, so subtle, only I could see it. That was the moment I knew for sure. She'd done it. And I swore, right then, under the wedding lights and blessings of the gods, that she would regret it. The wedding went on in a blur, music, laughter, rituals. I moved through it like a ghost, pretending to smile, clapping at the right moments, hiding my trembling hands in my lap. But inside me, a storm was building. During the Farahs, when Ria's gaze flicked to me again, her smile widened, mockery glinting behind her perfect lashes. You think you've won, I thought, my nails digging into my palms. But you've only started a war you can't finish. When the last of the guests left and the fireworks faded, I finally let myself breathe. The wig itched. The pain of humiliation clawed at me, but the anger kept me alive. I went to my room, locked the door again, and opened my laptop. If she wanted to play games, I would play too, but smarter. I started digging. Her social media, her past posts, old tagged photos. There had to be something. And then, buried deep in her old Instagram posts, I found it, a picture of her with another man. Not Arif. A caption, forever, no matter what. Dated just 1 month before Arif proposed. My pulse quickened. Who was he? The next photo was even worse, the same man, wearing a bracelet identical to the one Arif had just gifted her yesterday. Coincidence? I didn't think so. The sound of laughter drifted from the hall, Arif and Ria in their wedding suite. My heart twisted. He loved her so blindly. He'd chosen her over my warnings. But love could be blindness. And blindness could be broken. I closed the laptop and whispered to my reflection, you took my hair, Ria. I'll take your happiness. That night, as the house slept, I crept toward the newlyweds' room. The corridor smelled of roses and incense. I heard soft voices, laughter, whispers of love. Then silence. I stood outside their door, hand trembling over the knob. For a moment, I thought about barging in, screaming the truth, showing him the photos. But no, that would make me look desperate, bitter. No, this revenge had to be slow. Precise. Painful. Like losing your hair strand by strand until you finally realize what's been taken from you. The next morning, the guests were gone. The photographers packed up. Ria was now officially a part of my family. And so began my quiet mission, to expose her, to break her mask, and to make her confess. But what I didn't know was that she was already 3 steps ahead of me. Because Ria wasn't just playing games. She was rewriting my past, and destroying my future. The house was still humming with leftover music from the wedding when I woke up the next morning. Rose petals littered the floor like faded promises. My wig lay on the nightstand, twisted and lifeless. I stared at it for a long time, that fake crown, and whispered, never again. I made myself strong tea, bitter enough to burn the hesitation out of my throat. Ria's laughter floated down the hall. She was already winning hearts, helping my sister in the kitchen, charming the staff, pretending to be the perfect bride. Everyone adored her. Everyone but me. That morning, I began keeping notes. Not in a diary, too risky. I opened a new email draft on my phone, something nobody would check, and every night I typed what I saw, what she said, what she did. Day 1, Ria compliments my sorry but avoids eye contact. Mentions her family issues. Lies easily. Day 2, Arif gives her my wedding necklace for safekeeping. She calls it antique. He laughs. I don't. Each entry sharpened my focus. I wasn't just hurt anymore, I was collecting evidence. 3 days later, Arif left for a short business trip. That was my chance. I waited until the car disappeared around the corner, then walked straight into Ria's room. She was sitting by the mirror, brushing her hair, long, black, and cruelly perfect. Our eyes met in the reflection. "Beautiful morning, isn't it, Ma?" she said sweetly. "Depends on who you ask," I replied. She smiled, that same tight-lipped smile. "You seem angry. Still upset about your little accident?" Her voice was silk wrapped around poison. My fingers clenched around the edge of her dresser. "You think shaving my head was funny?" Her eyebrows lifted, all innocence. "I didn't say that." "No, but you meant it," I shot back. She turned, eyes glittering. "Maybe it was a lesson. You tried to dig into my past. I warned you to stop." The calm in her tone chilled me more than a shout ever could. I forced myself to step closer, lowering my voice. "If you think you can threaten me, you're mistaken." "Threaten?" She laughed softly. "Oh, Ma, we're family now. Let's not make this ugly." And with that, she brushed past me, leaving a faint scent of jasmine and victory. That night I couldn't sleep. Her words replayed in my mind. "You tried to dig into my past." She wasn't guessing, she knew. Someone had told her. But who? The next morning, while she was busy making breakfast for the elders, I opened her wardrobe. Everything looked ordinary: silks, perfumes, makeup. Then I found a locked jewelry box tucked behind a pile of clothes. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a tiny silver USB drive. I slipped it into my pocket and walked out quietly. In my room, I plugged it into my laptop. Hundreds of photos and videos loaded, smiling selfies, travel shots, nothing alarming at first. But then, a folder named Phoenix caught my eye. Inside were screenshots of text messages. "Ria, unknown number. She'll pay soon. After the wedding, everything will be mine." Another message, days later. "The serum worked. She's bald. I'll send pictures later." My hands went cold. Serum? I scrolled further: receipts, chat logs, a shipping invoice for a hair removal compound ordered under a fake name. So it hadn't been an accident. She'd mixed something into my hair oil. Planned it. Laughed about it. And worst of all, someone was helping her. That night, during dinner, I studied her closely. Every gesture, every word. When she poured Arif's water, her eyes darted toward my brother-in-law, Rajesh. He looked away too quickly. My pulse quickened. Rajesh? It made sense. He'd been acting strange for weeks: secret phone calls, sudden errands. Maybe Ria had found a weak spot in him, a way to manipulate him. I smiled across the table. "Ria, beta, you've adjusted so quickly. You must have had help." Her spoon froze midair. "Help?" "Yes," I said smoothly, glancing at Rajesh. "Someone guiding you through our family's habits." Rajesh coughed, avoiding my gaze. Ria forced a laugh. "Just observation, Ma. I learn fast." "I'm sure you do," I murmured. After dinner I slipped a small voice recorder, one Arif had gifted me years ago, under the edge of the living room sofa where they often talked after everyone went to bed. The next morning, I retrieved it. Ria's voice came through clearly. "She's starting to suspect. We have to move fast." Rajesh's answer was low but audible. "Don't worry. Once the property transfer is signed, she's out of the picture." My breath caught. Property transfer? What property? Then I remembered, Arif had insisted on adding Ria's name to the deed of the new family house as a wedding gift. The papers were still with the lawyer, and signed. If she managed to get me removed from the document, everything would be hers. I couldn't confront them yet. I needed proof that would destroy her in Arif's eyes. Proof that couldn't be denied or twisted. So I reached out to an old friend, Neha, who ran a small cybersecurity firm. When I told her everything, she listened quietly, then said, "Give me the USB. I'll trace where those messages were sent from. If there's a second person involved, we'll find them." For the first time since that morning of humiliation, I felt hope stir inside me. Days passed. I kept my act perfect, polite smiles, gentle words, helping with chores, pretending everything was fine. Ria relaxed. She thought she'd broken me. But inside, every smile I gave her was a sharpened knife. One evening, as the sunset bled gold through the curtains, my phone buzzed. A message from Neha. "Got something. You need to see this in person." I drove to her office that night, my heart pounding. When she turned her monitor toward me, my breath hitched. The unknown number Ria had been texting. It wasn't Rajesh. It was someone else entirely. Someone I had once called family. Neha's office lights buzzed softly as she turned her screen toward me. The phone number Ria had been messaging blinked in bold letters. I froze. It belonged to my own younger sister, Mira. For a moment, my mind refused to accept it. Mira, the one who'd stood by me through every storm, who'd helped plan Arif's wedding, who'd sworn she hated pretense. Why her? Neha zoomed in on the chat trail. Keep her busy till the signing. She suspects Rajesh, that's good. Let her chase the wrong shadow. When the property is ours, we disappear. My throat tightened. Ours. Mira and Ria were in it together. The drive home felt endless. The city lights blurred into streaks of betrayal. When I stepped into the house, Mira was there, laughing with my mother-in-law, serving tea as though her conscience were spotless. I forced a smile, hiding the storm behind my eyes. "Sister, you've been busy today?" "Always," she chirped. "Someone has to help Ria manage this mansion." Her tone was teasing, but the undercurrent made my heart ache. She didn't even flinch. That night I sat at my dressing table, the same place I'd found the pink note, and looked at my reflection. The wig, the forced smile, the hollow eyes. "You wanted a war, Ria," I whispered. "Now you'll have an army." The next day, I started changing the rules. At breakfast, I announced, "We'll be hosting a small charity dinner next week. All family members must attend. The press will be there too." Ria looked up from her plate, cautious. "That sounds sudden." "Yes," I said softly, "but family unity must be shown." Arif smiled, proud of me for taking initiative. Ria had no choice but to agree. Behind that calm announcement was my plan. The dinner would be my stage. By then, Neha would have finished tracing every bank transfer between Mira and Ria. The truth would be projected in front of the same people who'd watched my humiliation. In the meantime, I began to plant doubts in Ria's mind. I told Arif little stories, that Ria seemed distracted, that I'd overheard her crying at night, that perhaps she was overwhelmed. He loved her, but he also loved peace. The seeds of worry took root quickly. Ria, feeling his slight distance, began to panic. She tried harder to please everyone, to control every detail of the upcoming dinner. Exactly what I wanted. The more control she craved, the more mistakes she'd make. 3 days before the event, Neha called again. "Found the accounts," she said. Money from Mira's investment fund moved into an unregistered company. "Guess who's listed as director?" "Ria," I breathed. "And," she added quietly, "your son Arif's signature appears on one of the authorizations, probably forged." The walls around me seemed to close in. They were planning to take everything, the house, the accounts, even Arif's reputation. I thanked Neha and hung up, heart pounding. Then I opened my wardrobe and pulled out the jewelry box where I'd hidden the voice recorder. I pressed play. Ria's voice again, calm, confident. Once it's done, she'll have nothing left, not her home, not her pride. I smiled, slow and certain. We'll see. The night of the charity dinner arrived like thunder wrapped in velvet. The lawn sparkled with lights, reporters fluttered like moths, cameras clicked. I wore a new silk sari, no wig this time, just a light scarf that showed my baldness like a badge. Let them see what she'd done. I wasn't hiding anymore. Ria arrived in crimson, dazzling, confident, until she saw the projector screen being set up near the garden stage. "What's that?" she whispered. "Just a surprise presentation," I said. She didn't know that inside the laptop connected to that screen was a folder named Phoenix, her own collection of crimes, courtesy of Neha's careful work. When everyone had gathered, I took the microphone. "Family," I began, voice steady, "tonight we celebrate not only generosity but honesty. Because families built on lies eventually fall apart." A ripple of tension spread through the guests. Ria's smile faltered. Mira's eyes darted toward the exit. I clicked the remote. The first slide flashed, screenshots of the messages, the invoices, the plans. Gasps echoed. Mira stood up, trembling. "This is nonsense." Ria grabbed her wrist. "Sit down." Too late, Arif was already reading the messages on screen. His face turned pale. When the recording played, Ria's own voice plotting to take everything, silence fell heavy as stone. "I trusted you," Arif whispered, staring at her. "Listen, But the words died under the weight of evidence. The reporters captured every second. Mira tried to step forward, but my mother-in-law blocked her way. "You betrayed your own sister," she hissed. For the first time, Ria looked small. Her arrogance melted into fear. When the guests finally left, the house was silent except for the click of camera flashes fading into the distance. Ria sat alone on the sofa, stripped of jewelry and lies. I walked over, my voice low but clear. "You took my hair, my dignity, my peace. But I warned you, Ria, I don't lose. I learn." She looked up, eyes wet. "What will you do now?" "Nothing," I said. "The truth already did it for me." Then I turned away, the night breeze cool against my bare scalp, not a symbol of shame anymore, but of victory earned the hard way. As dawn painted the sky gold again, I brewed my tea, breathing in peace for the first time in months. Some battles don't need weapons, only patience, evidence, and the courage to stand bald before the world. Morning arrived quiet, too quiet for a house that had once thrummed with celebration. Newspapers already carried the scandal, bride and aunt accused in family fraud. The headlines hurt, but they also ended the secrecy that had been rotting us from the inside. Arif didn't speak for 2 days. He locked himself in his study, replaying every memory with Ria, trying to spot the first lie. I left food outside his door and a note that said only, "You're stronger than what she took from you." When he finally emerged, his face looked older. "Ma," he said quietly, "I didn't want to believe any of it. But you saved me." I touched his shoulder. "No, Beta. I just refused to stay blind." He sighed. "She's gone. She left a letter saying she's sorry." "Are you?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know. I loved who I thought she was." That honesty made me proud of him in a way I hadn't felt for years. Mira didn't vanish, the police called her in for questioning. Before they took her, she asked to see me. I was jealous, she confessed, eyes red. "You always had respect, a home, everything." She promised me a share if I helped her. I studied her for a long moment, torn between fury and pity. You didn't need a share of my house, I said softly. You needed peace in your own. Then I turned away as the officers led her out. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. Weeks turned into months. The reporters moved on to other scandals. Neighbors stopped whispering. Life crept back in like sunlight after a storm. I opened a small foundation in the same house, the Phoenix Trust, to help women who'd been publicly humiliated or defrauded. Every morning, I'd look at the signboard and smile at the irony. The word Ria had once used for her secret folder now stood for rebirth. My hair began to grow again, soft stubble at first, then determined strands. But I didn't hide it anymore. It became my symbol, that you can lose everything and still come back stronger. One evening, a letter arrived without a return address. Inside was a single photo, Ria in a small clinic, working with children, her head covered with a plain scarf. On the back she had written, "Thank you for teaching me consequence. I'm trying to change." I sat for a long while, the paper trembling between my fingers. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant freeing myself from the weight of anger. So I placed the photo in the foundation's office, next to the words, "Every scar tells a story worth surviving." Arav eventually smiled again. He rebuilt his business, donated half his first-year profits to the trust, and laughed when I teased him about remarriage. "Someday, Ma," he said. "When I learn to see with my heart, not my fear." I walked through the garden that evening, marigolds blooming again where trampled petals once lay. The same sun that had witnessed my shame now poured gold over my bare head. For the first time, I wasn't hiding, fighting, or proving anything. I was simply living. And in that stillness, I understood. Revenge may start a story, but forgiveness ends it with grace. The monsoon arrived early that year. Rain tapped the veranda rails like a patient drummer while I watched the garden turn from dust to emerald again. The smell of wet soil felt like memory itself, proof that endings could grow roots. Inside, the house no longer echoed with accusation. Laughter had returned, lighter, smaller, but honest. Arav spent most mornings helping at the Phoenix Trust. He said he wanted to see people instead of numbers. I pretended to scold him for neglecting his business, though secretly I was proud. Within 6 months, the trust had a waiting room full of stories, a teacher whose husband forged her signature, a young woman disowned after a viral rumor, an accountant rebuilding life after workplace fraud. Each case reminded me of my own fall, and of how thin the line is between victim and survivor. One afternoon, while sorting donation files, I caught Arav talking to a volunteer named Kavya. She was practical, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who smiled with her eyes before her lips. They were laughing about a shipment of mismatched chairs. I said nothing, only watched the light in my son's face, the kind of warmth that doesn't need permission to exist. But peace never arrives without testing its own strength. One morning a plain envelope landed on my desk. Inside were photocopies of legal papers, an old clause from the property deed that still listed Ria's name. The court had overlooked it. Arav read it, tense. "We can fix this, right?" "We will," I said, though my heart beat faster. The next day we filed a request to remove her share officially. Weeks of hearings followed. Reporters tried to stir the old scandal, but I refused interviews. Silence, I'd learned, can be its own weapon. On the final day of hearing, the judge stamped the document. The house was ours again, clean, lawful, whole. I walked out of the courtroom into the sunlight feeling lighter than I had since that cursed wedding morning. That evening, my phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. "Congratulations. This time, you won for both of us." I stared at it for a long time. No bitterness, no sarcasm, just a strange peace hidden in those words. I deleted the message but smiled. Maybe Rhea truly had changed. Weeks later, the Phoenix Trust hosted its first public seminar. I opened the session with a simple truth. Revenge is fire, justice is light. One burns, the other guides. Applause filled the hall. Among the audience sat Arav and Kavya, side by side. When our eyes met, he grinned, half sheepish. After the event, he said, "Ma, I'm thinking of proposing, slowly, not today. Just, eventually." I laughed. Make sure she likes rain and chaos. That's all we have here. Late that night, I stepped out onto the terrace. The moon floated above the city like forgiveness itself. I ran a hand through my hair, it had grown thick again, streaked with silver, and thought about how life had rewritten me. I wasn't the woman who woke bald and broken. I was the woman who learned that strength isn't loud, it's steady. I whispered into the wind, "Thank you for the lessons, even the painful ones." Somewhere inside, the story that began in humiliation ended in harmony. And that, I realized, was the truest revenge of all, living well enough to need none. 3 years had passed since the storm that nearly broke us. Our home no longer felt like a monument to pain, it had become the headquarters of the Phoenix Trust, now with branches in 5 cities. Every wall carried stories of women who refused to stay silent. Every morning began with a chorus of ringing phones, laughter, and the smell of chai brewing in the reception area. It wasn't just an organization anymore, it was a movement. And somehow, without realizing it, I had become its face. One evening, I received an email from a national conference on social justice. They wanted me as a keynote speaker. Me, the woman who once hid behind curtains, ashamed of a bald head and a ruined wedding. Arav grinned when I showed him. "Ma, you've become famous." I rolled my eyes. "Fame doesn't pay the bills." He smirked. "No, but it pays for purpose." We laughed, but I could sense a quiet pride in him. The same boy who once lived in denial now built systems for victims of digital fraud, using tech to trace stolen money. He had turned our tragedy into his fuel. A week before the conference, a new case arrived. A woman named Pooja claimed her husband and his business partner had stolen her inheritance and vanished abroad. When Arav saw the file, his expression changed. "Ma," he said slowly, "the partner's name is Vikram Kapoor." I froze. That was the man who had once helped Rhea hide her transactions, the one who disappeared before the police caught him. Now he was back, under a new alias. Old ghosts had a way of testing the living. We tracked Vikram's company, traced bank accounts, and finally found a pattern of fake charities used to launder stolen funds. Arav wanted to expose him immediately, but I stopped him. "Let's do it right," I said. "We don't burn, we build." So we gathered evidence, looped in legal aid, and informed authorities quietly. Within weeks, a police raid dismantled his empire. That night, Arav looked at me, eyes fierce. "I wanted to destroy him," he admitted. "But you were right. Justice tastes better when served with calm." I smiled. "We don't need revenge anymore, Beta." We became what revenge never could, useful. At the conference, the hall was filled with hundreds of faces, students, activists, journalists. I took the stage, lights bright on my silver hair. I spoke of pain, of betrayal, and of how silence turns victims into ghosts. Then I ended with this line. "Power doesn't come from hurting back. It comes from standing tall when the world expects you to kneel." A standing ovation followed. I saw Arav clapping in the front row, Kavya beside him, now wearing a ring. My heart swelled. After the conference, a young woman approached me, trembling. "Ma'am," she said softly, "I watched your story years ago online. It gave me courage to leave an abusive marriage. Today I run a small shelter of my own." Her words undid me. I hugged her, feeling tears rise, not of sorrow, but gratitude. This was the real legacy, not money, not fame, but the chain of courage passed from one broken soul to another. When I returned home that night, there was a parcel waiting, no name, just my address. Inside was a small diary bound in red. On the first page. I wanted to destroy you once. Now, I want to thank you. You taught me the cost of pride. Ria. The rest of the pages were blank, as if she had left space for me to write my own ending. I placed the diary on my bedside table and whispered. Maybe this was how stories heal, when even enemies learn peace. Weeks later, the Phoenix Trust unveiled its new slogan. Rise, but with grace. It was Ariv's idea. As the banner unfurled, rain began to fall again, just like the first day peace returned to our house. And standing there, among laughter, wet earth, and the smell of tea, I finally felt whole. The woman who once woke bald on her son's wedding day had risen, not in rage, but in resilience. The Phoenix Trust had become more than a foundation, it was a symbol. Every week, newspapers praised our work, television channels ran features, and strangers sent letters calling me an inspiration. But fame, I learned, is a fragile mask. It shines until someone decides to scratch it. It began with a whisper, a blog post claiming that our charity funds were being misused. At first, I ignored it. Lies are a tax on success, I told myself. But by evening, 3 more posts appeared, each with forged documents and manipulated screenshots. The story spread like wildfire, Phoenix Trust under investigation for fraud. By nightfall, our donations froze. By morning, our staff looked at me with questions I couldn't answer. Ariv stormed into my office, his voice shaking. Ma, someone's framing us. These documents, they look real. Kavya was already tracing the source. It's coming from overseas servers. Someone knows what they're doing. For the first time in years, I felt the same helplessness that had haunted me after Ria's betrayal, that cold realization that truth and lies travel at different speeds. Lies always arrive first. But this time, I wouldn't run or hide. I called a meeting with the board. We'll cooperate fully, I told them. If our truth is strong, it will survive the storm. Still, my hands trembled under the table. The next evening, Ariv burst into the room with his laptop. Ma, I found something. The IP address used to upload those documents, it traces back to a clinic in Goa. A chill ran through me. A clinic? He nodded grimly. The same one where Ria was last seen. For a moment, the world blurred. After all these years, was she back? And if she was, why now? Kavya placed a hand on my shoulder. If it's her, we'll find out. But this time, we face her together. 2 days later, we flew to Goa. The clinic sat near the sea, quiet, clean, painted white, as if it wanted to forget the sins it once held. Inside, a nurse recognized Ria's name immediately. She left a few weeks ago, she said. Said she was going abroad for a project on social rehabilitation. We were about to leave when an envelope arrived at the reception, addressed to me. The handwriting was unmistakable. Inside was a single line. You built your empire on forgiveness, now let's see if it survives truth. And beneath it, a photo, Ria standing beside a young man, her arm around him. The man looked like Ariv. My breath caught. The resemblance was uncanny, same jawline, same eyes. But the note on the back shattered me. Meet your real son. Ariv read the photo, his face pale. Ma, what is this? I tried to speak, but words failed. The past I'd buried clawed its way up. Before marrying his father, there had been another relationship, brief, complicated, painful. I had left that chapter behind forever. Could Ria have found traces of it? Or was this another trick, another attempt to destroy me? I clenched the photo in my fist. Listen to me, Arav. You are my son. Nothing else matters. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Back in the city, the inquiry deepened. The media smelled blood. Reporters camped outside our house. Each day brought a new headline, Phoenix founder's dark secret. Every time I turned on the TV, my name echoed in scandal. But when the auditors finished their review, they found nothing, every rupee accounted for. We were cleared. Yet the damage was done, reputation, trust, peace, all scarred again. And Ria? Vanished, leaving only a trail of smoke. That night, I sat alone in my office. I could go public, clear my name with legal threats, interviews, outrage, or I could do what Ria never could, let the truth speak slowly, without noise. I chose silence. Because those who rise from ashes twice don't need to shout, they let the world watch. Weeks later, an anonymous confession appeared online. The Phoenix Trust was never guilty. I wanted revenge and failed. But I did it because truth without healing becomes another weapon. I'm sorry. That single post changed everything. Donations returned. Support flooded in. But I didn't celebrate. I just whispered to the night, Ria, you still haven't learned peace. Because revenge, even in confession, still burns. I looked out at the rain, same as it had fallen years ago. And I realized, storms don't always come to destroy. Sometimes, they return to test what survived. And this time, I did. Rain still streaked the office windows when Arav knocked softly and entered, holding the photo that had nearly broken us. Ma, he said quietly, I think we should find him. The man in the picture, the stranger who looked like him, had become a shadow between us. Not an accusation anymore, but a question neither of us could escape. I nodded. Yes. If we're going to end this chapter, we face it together. Kavya traced the image metadata to a small workshop outside Pune, a vocational center that trained underprivileged youth. The manager remembered the young man instantly. Rohan, she said. Hard-working boy. Keeps to himself. Said he was adopted from an orphanage in Delhi. Arav and I exchanged a look. Delhi, the city where my life had begun before marriage, before everything. When we arrived, Rohan was repairing an old fan, sleeves rolled up, grease on his hands. He looked up, startled, as if some instinct had warned him of our approach. I'm Meera Desai, I began gently, using my maiden name for the first time in decades. This is my son, Arav. Rohan's eyes darted between us. You're the people from the news. Yes, Arav said. And we came because someone connected us through a photo. Rohan frowned, then retrieved a small envelope from his locker. This arrived for me last month. It had that photo too. And a note, find your mother before the truth finds you. I thought it was a scam. I took a deep breath. Do you know who sent it? He shook his head. No. But the handwriting, it looked like a woman's. Back at the trust, I asked our legal team to check his records. They found the adoption file. His biological mother had died in childbirth. The father's name was never recorded. Then a surprise, the orphanage matron had written a side note years later. Child's papers altered by a sponsor, details confidential. A sponsor. Ria's name was on the donation list that same year. It wasn't cruelty, then, it was her last unfinished attempt at confession. I visited Rohan again the next week. This time, I brought lunch and stories. He listened shyly as I talked about Arav's childhood, how he once tried to bake a cake with salt instead of sugar. Then Rohan smiled, a small uncertain curve. You don't owe me explanations, ma'am. But thank you for treating me like a person, not a mystery. Something inside me loosened, the guilt, the fear, the weight of old names. When we left, Arav said quietly, maybe Ria wasn't trying to destroy us this time. Maybe she was trying to give him family. I nodded. And maybe that's how forgiveness really works, past forward, not backward. Months passed. Rohan joined one of our skill training programs and, later, became its supervisor. He didn't replace anyone or claim anything, he simply belonged, the way good people do when given space. Arav treated him like a younger brother. Kavya called him our quiet miracle. And me? I finally felt what peace actually meant, not the absence of storms, but knowing which ones are worth walking through. One morning, I received a postcard from an address in Nepal. No name, only a short line. He found you. My work is done. I placed it beside the red diary on my shelf and whispered, rest now, Ria. You finally made something right. On the anniversary of the Phoenix Trust, we stood together for a photo, Arav, Kavya, Rohan, and me. Different stories, same frame. When the flash went off, I realized life had completed its circle. From betrayal to forgiveness, from isolation to belonging, the ashes had truly turned to light. And for the first time, I didn't think about the day I woke up bald. I thought about the day I finally stopped hiding from my own heart. Time has a strange gentleness when you finally stop fighting it. The Phoenix Trust was no longer just my story, it belonged to a generation that had grown up believing in it. New faces filled the halls, younger voices ran the meetings. And every time I saw them, I thought, this is what survival should look like, not one woman standing tall, but many walking forward. Arav and Kavya were expecting their first child. Rohan had become the quiet backbone of our rural programs. I often found the three of them in the conference room arguing over logistics and laughing at the same time. The sound made the house feel alive again. One afternoon, Arav came to me with a file. Ma, he said softly, the board thinks it's time you step down officially. They want you to be chair emeritus. You'd still guide us, but, let us lead. His words landed gently, but they still ached. For years, the Phoenix Trust had been my anchor, my second heartbeat. To imagine it without my daily touch felt like letting go of my own reflection. I smiled anyway. Then lead well, I told him. Make mistakes worth remembering. And don't forget why we began, not to save the world, but to teach it how to heal. That evening, I packed my desk. Among old papers and faded photographs, I found the first pamphlet we ever printed, crooked logo, misspelled tagline, but full of courage. I slipped it into my bag as a reminder, perfection had never been our goal, purpose was. The next month, we opened a new branch in the same town where I'd first met Rohan. During the inauguration, he spoke for the first time publicly. I used to think survival meant pretending nothing hurt, he said. But this foundation taught me that healing means using the hurt to help someone else. I watched from the front row, tears warm in my eyes. The audience stood to applaud him, and I thought, this is it. This is the moment I can finally rest. That night, back home, I began writing a letter, not to Ria, not to my past, but to whoever would someday run the Phoenix Trust. Remember, justice without compassion is just another form of power. Listen before you act. Help quietly. And when the world forgets your name, smile, because that means you did it for the right reasons. When I finished, I placed the letter inside the red diary. The same diary Ria had left me blank years ago, now filled, page by page, with lessons born of mistakes and mercy. Weeks later, our anniversary gala lit the city hall. Donors, volunteers, old friends, even some of the women whose lives we'd touched, filled the room. Kavya took the stage and announced, tonight, We rename our scholarship program in honor of our founder, the Mira Desai Resilience Fund. The crowd rose to its feet. For the first time, applause didn't make me shrink, it made me grateful. Because this time, the sound wasn't for tragedy survived, it was for hope sustained. Later, as fireworks shimmered over the river, I walked alone to the balcony. Arif joined me, holding a cup of tea. He said, "You built something that doesn't need you to survive. That's real legacy." I looked at him, my son, my pride, my proof that pain can raise kindness if tended with care. I smiled. Then my work here is done. The next morning, I woke not to chaos or headlines, but birdsong. I went to the mirror. Silver hair framed a face lined with stories, not scars. For the first time since that wedding day years ago, I whispered the same words again, but now they meant something new. I woke up, and I am free. Years later, when people speak of the Phoenix Trust, they no longer mention scandal or betrayal. They talk about the thousands of women it helped, the communities it rebuilt, the quiet strength that grew out of one woman's worst morning. Sometimes, I sit on the same veranda where it all began, the place I once cried until the world went silent. Now it's filled with laughter from the grandchildren running between marigold pots, shouting, "Nanny, story time." And I smile, because they have no idea that the story they love was once my truth. One afternoon, a breeze blew through the garden, scattering petals across my lap. A single feather landed among them, white, weightless, perfect. For a moment, I thought of everything that had led me here. The humiliation, the shaved head, the betrayal, the years of rebuilding, and the people who had drifted in and out of my life like seasons. And I realized something I never could have understood back then. I wasn't the fire that burned for revenge. I was the feather that learned how to ride the wind after the flames went out. Rohan visited often. He ran the rural branches now, patient and grounded. Arif and Kavya managed the headquarters in the city. One evening, he handed me a folder. "Annual report, Ma," he said proudly. I laughed. "You all run this place better than I ever did." He smiled. "You taught us that leading isn't about control. It's about letting others stand taller." When he left, I sat staring at the logo on the file, the Phoenix Trust. Once it had been just a symbol of survival. Now it stood for something bigger: rebirth, renewal, community. In the golden light of dusk, I took out the red diary, the one Ria had sent, the one I'd filled with lessons, not grudges. I turned to the last page and wrote one final line. "Forgiveness doesn't erase the fire, it teaches you how to carry its warmth." Then I closed it gently, feeling the weight lift, as if every unfinished sentence in my life had finally found its ending. When I'm gone, I know they'll tell the story differently. Maybe they'll soften the edges, skip the humiliation, call it an inspiring journey. That's all right. The truth doesn't need to be pretty to be powerful. Because somewhere, a woman will wake up one morning, broken, frightened, angry, and she'll hear my story. And maybe, just maybe, she'll think, if she could rise, so can I. That will be enough. The night settles softly outside my window. The foundation lights glow in the distance like constellations, little stars born from old wounds. I whisper a silent prayer. May no one ever need to learn strength the hard way. And then, for the final time, I close my eyes, smile, and let peace take the shape of sleep. Because the woman who once woke bald on her son's wedding day has finally woken whole.